You wake up one morning and realize you have absolutely no idea what you're doing with your life. The job that once excited you now feels like a prison. The relationship you thought was solid suddenly feels empty. The dreams you had seem laughably distant. And worst of all, you can't even pinpoint when things went wrong. You just know that somewhere along the way you got completely and utterly lost. If this sounds familiar, congratulations. You're not having a breakdown, you're having a dark wood moment. And 700 years ago, an Italian poet mapped out exactly how to escape it. But here's the thing, almost nobody talks about what Dante Alighieri actually discovered about being lost, because we've turned his masterpiece into a tourist attraction for hell when it was really a survival manual for finding yourself again. Picture this. It's the year 1300. Dante is 35 years old, which in medieval terms meant he was halfway through his expected lifespan. And he opens his poem with one of the most brutally honest lines ever written. In the middle of the journey of our life, I found myself in a dark wood, for the straight way was lost. Not at the beginning of life, not at the end, but right in the middle when you're supposed to have it all figured out. That's when Dante admits he's completely disoriented. The path he thought he was on has vanished, and he's surrounded by darkness. Now, most people read this and think it's just a poetic way to start an epic about hell. But Dante was being literal. He's describing that specific moment of existential crisis that hits you when you realize you've been sleepwalking through your own life. And here's what makes it brilliant. He doesn't say he made a wrong turn. He says the straight way was lost, meaning the path itself disappeared. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't a moral failure. Sometimes life just becomes a dark wood, and you find yourself there whether you chose it or not. So what exactly is this dark wood? Dante describes it as savage and harsh and strong. So bitter it is that death is little more, which sounds dramatic until you've actually been there. You know that feeling when you're going through the motions, but nothing feels real anymore. When you wake up with a sense of dread you can't explain. When success feels hollow and failure feels inevitable. When you look at your life from the outside and wonder who that person is and why they're making such terrible decisions. That's the dark wood. It's not depression exactly. Though it can lead there, it's not just stress or burnout. Though those are symptoms, it's a fundamental disconnection from your own path. A loss of narrative coherence in your life, where you can no longer see where you came from or where you're going. Dante understood that this wasn't about lacking willpower or making bad choices. He describes trying to climb out immediately. He sees a hill bathed in sunlight and thinks, if I can just push through, if I can just try harder, I'll get out of this. But then 3 beasts block his path. A leopard representing fraud and malice, a lion representing pride and violence, and a she-wolf representing insatiable desire and greed. These aren't external obstacles, they're internal ones. They're the patterns that keep you trapped. The leopard is that voice that tells you to fake it, to put on a mask, to manipulate your way out. The lion is the ego that insists you should be able to muscle through this alone, that asking for help is weakness, and the she-wolf is the endless consumption, the scrolling, the shopping, the substances. The desperate attempts to fill the void with more. And here's the crucial insight Dante discovered. You cannot defeat these beasts by yourself. Every time he tries to go around them, they drive him back down into the darkness. This is where most self-help advice fails completely, because it tells you to be more disciplined, to have a better morning routine, to manifest your way out of the dark wood. But Dante understood something deeper. When you're truly lost, you need a guide, someone who has walked this path before. And not just any guide, but the right one for your specific darkness. In his case, the poet Virgil appears, sent by Beatrice, who represents divine love and wisdom. And Virgil's first words are genius. He doesn't offer empty encouragement. He doesn't tell Dante to think positive. He says you cannot pass through these beasts. They will kill you if you try. But there is another way. We must go down. We must go through hell itself to reach the other side. Think about how counterintuitive this is. Dante wants to climb up to the light and Virgil says no. First, you must descend into your deepest fears. You must walk through the very thing you've been avoiding. This is the forgotten map, the part nobody talks about. Real transformation doesn't come from bypassing your darkness. It comes from walking directly through it with someone who knows the way. So they begin the descent, and immediately Dante wants to quit. At the gates of hell, he reads the famous inscription, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." And he turns to Virgil terrified. But Virgil tells him that losing false hope is exactly the point. Hope built on illusions is what keeps you trapped. Real hope comes from facing what's actually there. And as they descend through the circles of hell, Dante encounters every possible way a human being can be lost. And this is where his map becomes practical, because he's not just describing punishments. He's describing the psychology of being stuck. In the first circle, he finds people who weren't bad, but also weren't committed to anything. They lived in the dark wood their whole lives without ever acknowledging it, never choosing a path, never taking a real risk, forever in limbo. And Dante sees them and realizes, this is what happens if you never enter the dark wood consciously. You stay there forever in a gray twilight. Then he descends deeper and encounters those trapped by lust, by gluttony, by hoarding and wasting, by wrath. Here's what's fascinating. These aren't presented as moral failings in the way we usually think of them. They're presented as forms of being trapped in repetitive patterns. The lustful are blown around by winds eternally. They chose to be swept away by passion, and now cannot choose at all. The gluttonous lie in mud. They sought comfort in consumption and now cannot move. The hoarders and wasters push giant weights in opposite directions forever. They were obsessed with having or not having, and missed the point of living entirely. Dante is seeing that hell is not a place of external punishment. It's the internal experience of being completely identified with your worst patterns, of having no distance from your compulsions, no perspective on your pain. These people aren't evil, they're stuck. And the deeper Dante goes, the more he realizes these aren't other people. These are parts of himself, potentials he could have fallen into, aspects he did fall into. The dark wood contains all of this. The real turning point comes in the deepest circle. At the very center of hell, frozen in ice, is Satan himself. And here's where Dante's insight becomes revolutionary. Satan isn't a figure of fire and chaos. He's frozen, completely immobile, trapped in ice up to his chest, weeping tears that freeze as they fall, with three faces each chewing on a traitor. And this image captures something profound about being truly lost. The deepest hell isn't hot passion, it's cold paralysis. It's the inability to move at all, the complete absence of will. When you're at the bottom of the dark wood, you're not raging against the world. You're frozen, numb, going through motions that mean nothing. And here's the brilliant twist. Dante doesn't defeat Satan, he doesn't even confront him. Virgil picks him up and they climb down Satan's body. But because Satan is at the center of the earth, climbing down becomes climbing up. They pass through the center point and suddenly they're ascending. This is the map's most important instruction. The way out of the deepest darkness is not to fight it, not to defeat it, but to go completely through it until you reach the point where down becomes up, where the direction reverses. They emerge from hell at the base of Mount Purgatory, and Dante sees stars for the first time in his journey. He's no longer in the dark wood, but he's not yet where he needs to be. And this is where most people abandon the map, because they think escaping hell is the end of the story. But Dante understood that getting out of crisis is just the beginning. Now comes the hard work of purgatory, the active reconstruction of yourself. And here's the crucial difference between hell and purgatory. In hell, people are trapped by their patterns with no way out. In purgatory, people are actively working to transform their patterns. They're choosing to change. They're in process. The lustful are still dealing with desire, but now they're walking through purifying fire. The proud are carrying heavy stones, but they're moving up the mountain. Same struggles, completely different relationship to them. In hell, you're identified with your pain. In purgatory, you're working with it. Dante climbs the mountain, and at each terrace he encounters a different pattern being transformed. Pride being humbled, envy learning to celebrate others, wrath learning peace, sloth learning energy, avarice learning generosity, gluttony learning temperance, lust learning love. And these aren't quick fixes. Each terrace requires real work, real time, real commitment. But here's what makes purgatory bearable unlike hell. There's movement, there's progress, there's community, people help each other climb, they share songs, they share stories. They acknowledge how hard it is, but they keep going. Because they can see the summit, they know there's a destination. The dark wood, you can't see where you're going. In hell, you can't move at all. In purgatory, you can finally see the path and walk it even though it's steep. At the top of Mount Purgatory, Dante enters the earthly paradise, the Garden of Eden. And this is where Virgil must leave him because reason and human wisdom can only take you so far. Virgil got him through hell. He guided him up the mountain. But for the final transformation, Dante needs a different guide. Beatrice appears and she doesn't congratulate him. She confronts him. She asks him why he wasted so much time, why he forgot his true path, why he settled for less than what he was capable of. And Dante breaks down. He weeps, he admits everything in this confession. This radical honesty with himself, this is what finally allows the transformation. He bathes in the rivers of purgatory, Lethe, which makes you forget your sins, and Euno, which strengthens your memory of good, and he's remade. Not better than he was, but more truly himself than he ever was. The dark wood burned away everything false, and the journey through hell and purgatory burned away everything that kept him from seeing clearly. Then comes paradise. And here's where Dante's map reveals its final secret. Paradise isn't static. It's not harps and clouds and boredom. It's dynamic, it's cosmic, it's overwhelming. Dante ascends through 9 spheres, each more brilliant than the last, meeting souls who have become so identified with love that they're barely individuals anymore. They're part of a great harmony. And what he discovers is that paradise isn't a reward for being good. It's the natural result of becoming so aligned with your true nature that you can't help but participate in the greater pattern. The people he meets aren't perfect. They were warriors and lovers and rulers and monks. They made mistakes, they struggled, but they stayed on the path. They kept choosing alignment over comfort, truth over convenience. And now they're part of something infinitely larger than themselves. At the very peak, Dante has a vision of God. Not as an old man with a beard, but as pure light, pure love, pure existence. 3 circles of different colors, but the same dimension, each reflecting the others. And in that light, he sees the entire cosmos, every choice, every pattern, every life forming a perfect harmony. And he realizes that everything, even the dark wood, even hell itself, was part of a larger pattern drawing him home. The suffering wasn't meaningless. The lostness wasn't failure. It was initiation. It was the call to wake up, to stop sleepwalking, to start actually living. And then in the final lines of the entire work, Dante says his desire and will were turned like a wheel, all in one motion, by the love that moves the sun and the other stars. His personal will and cosmic will aligned perfectly. Not through force, not through struggle, but through surrender to a love so vast he can barely comprehend it. So what is Dante's forgotten map? It's this. When you find yourself in the dark wood, don't panic, don't pretend you're not there. Don't try to positive think your way out. Acknowledge where you are, admit you're lost. Stop defending yourself against the truth of your situation. Then find a guide, someone who has walked this path. Not someone who will tell you what you want to hear, but someone who will tell you what you need to know. Someone who will say, yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, you have to go down before you go up. Yes, you have to face things you've been avoiding, and then commit to the descent. Walk through your personal hell. Examine every pattern that has you trapped. The lust, the gluttony, the greed, the wrath, the pride. Don't judge them. Just see them clearly. See where you're stuck. See where you're going in circles. See where you're frozen. And keep going until you reach the center. The point of complete paralysis, complete truth, complete surrender. Because that's where the direction reverses. That's where down becomes up. When you emerge on the other side, don't think you're done. Now comes the real work of purgatory. Now you actively rebuild yourself. You take each pattern you saw in hell and you transform it. You don't eliminate desire. You redirect it toward what truly nourishes you. You don't eliminate will. You align it with deeper purpose. You don't eliminate your individuality. You place it in service of something greater. And this takes time. This takes effort. There are no shortcuts up Mount Purgatory. But unlike the dark wood, you can see where you're going. Unlike hell, you can move. You're not trapped anymore, you're choosing. And that makes all the difference. Every step up the mountain is a choice. Every terrace you complete is an integration. Every pattern you transform becomes a source of strength rather than suffering. At the summit, let go of the guides that got you there. Reason is beautiful, but it's not enough. Human wisdom is valuable, but it's not ultimate. Be willing to meet whatever represents your deepest truth. Your Beatrice, whether that's love, or beauty, or purpose, or the divine, or simply your own deepest knowing. And let it confront you. Let it ask the hard questions. Why did you waste time? Why did you forget? Why did you settle? Answer honestly. Weep if you need to, rage if you must, but tell the truth. Radical, complete, devastating truth. And then let yourself be washed clean. Not to become perfect, but to become real. To remember what you knew before the dark wood. To strengthen what's genuinely good in you. Not what you're supposed to be, but what you actually are, when all the false layers are stripped away. And finally, ascend, say yes to paradise, not as an endpoint, but as a participation in something vast. Align your personal desires with a deeper pattern. Find your place in the great cosmic dance. Become so much yourself that you're no longer just yourself. You're part of the harmony, contributing your unique note to the symphony. And here's the secret. Paradise isn't something you achieve. It's something you recognize you were always part of. The dark wood was never separate from paradise. It was the doorway, the initiation, the call you had to answer to wake up to what was always true. You are loved beyond measure. You belong to something infinite. Your life is part of a pattern so beautiful you couldn't see it until you got completely lost and found your way back home. This is Dante's map. Not a religious text, though it uses religious imagery. Not a moral lesson, though it contains wisdom. But a psychological and spiritual GPS for the universal human experience of being lost. Getting found, getting transformed, and coming home to yourself. 700 years later, it's still the most accurate map we have. Because Dante had the courage to admit he was lost. The humility to accept guidance. The strength to descend into his darkness. The persistence to climb his mountain. And the openness to be transformed by love. He wrote it all down in poetry so beautiful it survived centuries. But more importantly, he wrote it down so that when you find yourself in your dark wood, when the straight way is lost, when the beasts block your path and you don't know which way to turn, you'll know that someone has been there before. Someone made it through. Someone left you a map, and the map says this: go down, go through, go up, be transformed, come home. You're not lost forever. You're just at the beginning of the greatest journey of your life, and you don't have to walk it alone. In fact, you can't walk it alone. That's part of the map too. We need guides, we need companions. We need a path through the darkness, and Dante gave us all three, wrapped in the most beautiful poem ever written. All we have to do is trust the map and start walking.